morning and welcome to episode 21 of Wake Up West Orange. We're happy to be coming to you this morning to just have a conversation and actually answer a question. If you remember in episode 20, Angie put it out there if anyone has a question for us. And so, Angie, go ahead and share Brett's question. It's actually a good one.
It is a good one. So Brett wanted to know a struggle that turned into a blessing in each of our lives.
Yeah.
And so, I don't know, that's an interesting thought, because usually we focus either on the struggle or the blessing, but we don't think about the times that one turns into the other. So there was the time that I was in a situation where I had been teaching for 5 years, and it was supposed to be the year I got my tenure, but it turned out that year they decided that they were going to do some budget cuts and different things, and I was let go. And I was not teaching. And it was a struggle for me, because when you think, okay, this is my purpose, this is what I do, and you can't do that, it's an incredible struggle. The blessing comes in the fact that I learned a lot about faith, I think. I had applied at lots of different districts around where we lived, and I thought, okay, I'm going to get in on one of these spots, surely one of these spots. And it was 3 weeks before school was supposed to start, and I still had not been hired on anywhere. And I saw a friend in a grocery store, and she said, well, I just got hired in over here at this district. You ought to come on out. I think they've got an opening. And I went in, and the principal interviewed me, and it was a good fit. And we went and we talked to the superintendent, because this was a tiny little town, and that's how things worked. And I worked at that district for 3 years, and it was a really great experience for me. I think I learned a lot about waiting and God's timing, not my timing. And so it really was a blessing, although it didn't seem like that in May.
Right. Yeah, you first get the news and everything.
Yeah, it was hard.
Yeah, so that's good. So we don't have donuts here this week like last week, but we're still enjoying our time with you. Tim, can you think of a...
Yeah, there's a lot of different things like this that I guess happen in our lives, but one that would be most recent that came to my mind as you were kind of thinking about this, or we were talking about this. My mom passed away earlier this year, and at the time that occurred, it was obviously very difficult, and we weren't expecting it. There were some complications she'd had health-wise with cancer and things, that just everything kind of escalated due to also a kidney infection. So without diatribing that, my point is it was difficult, and that was a struggle. But then as COVID-19 hit, my sister and I spent a lot of time discussing how we did not want our mother, of course, to pass away. We were grateful that it happened when it happened, because if she had gotten sick, and probably would have with COVID, she would not have been able to be there with her. None of us would have been able to actually see her, potentially, if she had passed away after that point. And we were all able to have spent time with her. And it's an interesting, I know, kind of concept to sort of walk through on that, to think, how is that a blessing? Because something bad still happened. But it could have been much worse. It could have been even more difficult for us to emotionally walk through and handle. And so I'm grateful that though that happened, I'm very grateful that she didn't die in that way. It was less painful the way that she passed, and that we were able to have been near her and all those things. So that's mine. Yeah.
Yeah. No, that's a good way to look at that and see the blessings in the midst of what could otherwise just be a devastating event for you. So, well, Brett, I think of two things. So, and in the spirit of Brett, who likes to talk a lot, I also like to talk a lot. So, but the first thing I think of, Brett, is, you know, this year the Tennessee Vols are starting the season pre-ranked at number 15. And that is huge for Tennessee Vol fans.
15 out of
15 out of all the teams in football.
My bad.
So, Mr. Cocky over here, since Alabama always is.
We're only ranked number 2.
Right. Yeah, like every other year.
Right.
So, but, you know, Tennessee, this is a big deal to be ranked number 15, especially after the turmoil of the last 21 years. And so the last 21 years have been horrendous. And you know, it's almost not even been a roller coaster. It's like every, you know, we're all ready after like game 5 saying, well, next year. And then, you know, the recruiting class, and we get excited, and then a new coach, and then we don't like that coach. And the blessing in that was now ranked 15, I'm not even hyper or excited. I'm already expecting it to not go well. So I just enjoy any wins that Tennessee gets. If we even like Alabama, if we keep it within 20 points or, you know, make Tim nervous for 3 quarters, that'll, you know, that I find satisfaction in those kind of things.
This year is a wide open anybody's thing. I'm serious.
It
when
is.
I say that. You never know.
It is, but
know.
I don't get stressed out like I did for like 10 straight years. You know, we'd be playing the Gators. It's they're not even big games now. So, so that's kind of, you know, changed my perspective. On a more serious one, when I was 19 years old in college, my Dad was letting us know that my mom was sick. And, you know, they couldn't figure it out, and she wasn't feeling terribly bad, but they just couldn't figure it out. And they finally said, well, it's probably diverticulitis. We're going to send you to Nashville, which is an hour and a half from where my parents live. And anyway, the doctor all of a sudden said, no, I want you to come back, look at one more thing. They ended up doing emergency surgery, and I don't know, there's probably a technical name for this, but her organs internally, she had internal poisoning, and they were literally cemented together. They had to go in there, break that down, but, you know, who's going to know that they have that? And so if it wasn't for this slight pain that she couldn't figure it out, if it wasn't for that, then she wouldn't be here today. And so, so sometimes those little things, you know, God gave us this body for a reason to let us know, hey, something's not right. So, so sometimes there's things like that. Pain can be a good thing, you know. And
I read a book a few years back that, by an author that I really appreciate, and the concept of the book was that many creative things come out of pain or difficult situations. And if you will kind of walk through, there's art and music and other things that wouldn't have ever maybe happened had not loss also taken place. And, you know, in current culture for us or whatever, that there's 2 or 3 albums that artists have put out that because they had like a breakup or something happened, and then they put this music out that triggered something within them that they sang kind of through it. And, you know, 2 or 3 of those, every song on the album is incredible, and you hate that they had to go through it, but now their music is maybe helping someone else heal.
That's right.
It's amazing.
What's it called? Tony Dungy's son has whatever it's called, where you don't feel pain, like in his hand. Like if his son puts his hand on the stovetop, you know, it doesn't burn it, and so literally it's burning his flesh. I forgot what that's called. So we don't rehearse these things for, you know, 3 days ahead of time with the transcript. Right. I would look.
If you know, just shout it out.
Yeah. But whatever that is called, Tony Dungy has used that to talk about how pain can actually be beneficial. That you know this is hot. You know, don't touch this.
Right.
And so so sometimes we're so pain adverse and risk adverse. But there's things like that, and I think when I think about emotions, you know, that none of us want to feel negative feelings. We don't want to feel depressed, angry, fear. There's a healthy fear. You know, there's certain things where, you know, if you know it's sending you a signal, You know,
Right.
you know that
Right.
you know. So God gave us emotions even to help us to know, you know, that something's wrong and something needs. Something needs to, something's out of sorts. You know, maybe it's body chemistry and depression. You know, maybe you haven't gotten out and gotten enough sunlight in the last month,
Right.
or whatever. So there's ways to fix it, but they're there for, for a reason. So, you think of any Bible verses or stories?
Well, when I think about a blessing that comes from a struggle, I think about Joseph.
Mm-hmm.
You know,
Definitely.
he had been sold off by his brothers into slavery. We've got, a new area that he has not been to before. He's got to learn a new system, and he works his way from the bottom up by just being who God would have him be. And through that, we've got the blessings that he was able to give to his family and to the whole surrounding area, not just his family, but nations.
Mm-hmm.
So, God clearly had a design and had something beautiful to come out of that struggle.
Mm-hmm.
Yeah. Yeah, I love that story, just the struggles he went through at Potiphar's house, and then he all of a sudden finds himself in a position that he could have put his whole family in jail, essentially, or just shunned them and said, "You don't get any food, I'm sorry, you know what you did to me."
Mm-hmm.
But he made that a blessing for himself and them. He forgave them, which means it's not, he's not having to deal with the weight of not forgiving them. And then also they are released from probably the guilt
Oh, yeah.
that they put on themselves and the shame with their father and just all that. So yeah, it's a beautiful story.
Yeah, him saying, Genesis 50:20, I believe it is. You intended this to harm me,
Yep.
but God intended it for good. And for that paradigm shift that
Yeah.
we have when we're looking through the lens of God's perspective. This one just jumped out to me, so I grabbed my phone to look at my Bible app. This one just came to my mind is Paul in Philippians 1. What a powerful thing for him to say. Philippians 1, beginning in verse 17 and 18. The former, or let's start verse 15. It is true that some preach Christ out of envy and rivalry, but others out of goodwill. And he goes on to say in verse 18, but what does it matter? The important thing is that in every way, whether from false motives or true, that Christ is preached. So some of them were putting him down, and they had ill will and bad motives. And Paul's like, he's not saying that's a good thing, but he's like, the bigger picture is Christ is still being preached, that God can even use, people with agendas,
Yeah. Yeah.
to still do something good with it. So that's one that comes, to my mind as well.
Well, I think Jesus also, through that, the idea that Jesus is part of that teaching, he gave that aspect to his followers, us included. You're going to have trouble.
Mm-hmm.
Things are going to happen in your life. Just
Yes.
because you now follow me or you're giving your life to me, that doesn't mean everything's going to be, peaches and rainbows. You're going to have bad days. You're going to have days where you wonder what in the world.
Mm-hmm.
But it's going to be okay. This all works out. It already is worked out. And he just wants us to trust him through it. Because on the other side, that's where the good stuff kind of happens. So it's hard. It's hard to do that sometimes. We find ourselves in, relationships or conflict or pain or loss. All those things really make us wonder what next or what, why. That's a big question. But, it turns out okay.
Yeah, it does. Well, we appreciate that question. We invite others to submit questions to us. And until next time, we hope you have a great rest of the week.